Welcome to the Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by the one and only Lawrence Conley. Welcome back to the studio, Lawrence. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, mate. You know, despite the turmoil at Celtic, I think we're happy with the football Ange has given us. You know, despite what's going on in I suppose the more professional side of things with the CEO.
Professional? Seriously?
I was struggling for a word for it there. You know, it's kind of supposedly more professional side, so we say.
Well, we will be having a chat about that. We spoke yesterday. There's quite a few points I want to cover. We didn't get a chance to cover yesterday, but we'll also look ahead, Lawrence, to the big game on Thursday night. It's a fairly early kickoff, 5:45 on Thursday night, and the challenge that Real Betis will pose to Ange Postecoglou's men, just as we start getting back to winning ways at the weekend. So let's start with that, because that leads us in to Thursday night. And we'll also have a wee chat about various other issues surrounding Celtic at the moment. Barrafield, for example. Let's have a wee talk about that, because I know you used to go down there as a kid and watch Celtic training. And we need to also focus on our former player, Craig Bellamy, who has moved away from the game for a spell to deal with his depression. So we'll be speaking all about that. But let's start off with the game against Ross County. We went 3-0, fairly convincing, Lawrence. What did you take away from that we can use on Thursday night? Who has given Ange Postecoglou a dilemma? I'm thinking Montgomery. Obviously, if Taylor doesn't make it, I'm looking at Anthony Ralston / Josip Juranovic at right back. I'm also looking at the performance of Tommy Rogic, which wasn't great, I've got to say, against Ross County. Does he drop out? Do we bring Soro or McCarthy in? Quite a few questions to be answered, but we'll start off in the defence. Greg Taylor, you've been a big champion of Taylor since he signed for the club, Lawrence. How do we play this on Thursday night? He's obviously had the reoccurring shoulder injury. Do you go for Montgomery, who's looked pretty impressive in the few games that he's played, with either Juranovic or Ralston at right back, or do you go for Ralston, the returning Ralston at right back, with Juranovic on the other side, as he did at Ibrox? That's a dilemma at the back. How do you deal with that?
For me, kind of Europe's secondary this season, but I think I would play Montgomery at left back. He's looked good when he's come in. We're about developing players, and at right back, I'd probably stick with Juranovic just now. Give Tony a bit of rest. We've got a lot of games coming up, but at least we've got options in defence now. You know, kicks off this season.
One right back.
You know, could we put a back four together? You know, Cameron Carter-Vickers, as good a debut as we've seen in a while. You know, at least since Kyogo's. But it's who's your centre half's going to be? You know, Starfelt seems to be growing into the role more and more. Welsh has performed well, so we've got a few options, haven't we? Which it wasn't looking like before we went on the mad spending spree and brought all these players in that were obviously needed, and we're probably still a few short.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are, and we're running with a kind of shoestring bench, I think it's safe to say, because when you look at that bench against Ross County, there are players on that. I mean, Scales and Uragidi have not made a first-team appearance. They're sitting on the bench. You think to yourself, if we need to bring those players in against Ross County, then, you know, I'm fairly comfortable with that, Lawrence. Moving into Thursday night's game, you know, it's a bigger bench. We're going to have 9 sitting on it. And then you're starting to pluck younger players with less experience who, you know, if you were to risk a player like Taylor, for example, and he gets an injury, you're then looking onto that inexperienced bench. So it is a bit of a concern, despite the fact that we brought 12 in. I was pointing this out yesterday. If you include the returning loanees, we lost 15 first-team players. We brought 12 in. So it sounds great that you're bringing all these guys in, but we're still a few short from the personnel that we had last season. Lawrence, I think on a personal level, and I'm going to bring this up because we've got to also mention Liam Scales, Stevie Boy. And again, this isn't a personal thing for me in relation to Liam Scales, but this isn't the game to throw in a debutant. If you've got someone like Montgomery who's got the experience, albeit very little experience in the first team. He's done well when he's played, or alternatively, you play Juranovic supposedly out of position. Because I just think when you're a Croatian internationalist, Lawrence, with that level of experience, and we've seen him playing, for Werder Bremen, Legia Warsaw, we know what he can do at that level. You've got to have confidence that he can switch from the right to the left. We've seen him playing against Rangers, and he was comfortable there. So I would more than likely, if Ralston's fit, I would go with Ralston at right back and Juranovic at left back, which again might be a bit unfair on Montgomery, because I was actually saying he should be playing against Rangers at Ibrox. He should start against Rangers at Ibrox. But since then, I've seen Juranovic playing at left back, and I think he's solid enough to be playing there.
No, listen, he's definitely got the ability to do it. But for me, it's Montgomery. I think he gives you more going forward at left back. We want to develop players and trust players, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Montgomery's definitely looks like he's got a big future ahead of him. I agree with you. I think it's too early for Scales. But I would have Juranovic at right back, Montgomery at left back. If you start with Ralston and Juranovic, one picks up an injury, Tony picks up an injury, you then move Juranovic over and then dropping Montgomery in. I think it's just got a better balance if you going forward as well. Montgomery gives us a bit of height, which we do lack a bit in defence. So, yeah, for me, it's Montgomery left back, Juranovic right back. Centre halves, I'd probably go with Starfelt and Cameron Carter-Vickers.
Carter-Vickers, as you say, an impressive debut. Done all of the basic defending that we shouldn't take for granted, because we haven't seen much of it done all that well in the last 12 months. Lawrence, he done all that kind of side of things. I was going to say effortlessly, but he done it naturally. We want to start building a relationship between our two centre halves, and I think that although Stephen Welsh will be feeling hard done by, we called it last week in the run up to the game. Stephen Welsh is going to sit it out. You're not bringing in a centre half of that quality and not playing him. And I think that as the season progresses, Tony Ralston will probably fall victim to that way of thinking as well. You will play Juranovic when he's fit, and I think you'll play Carter-Vickers when he's fit. It was a commanding performance. He also looked, for me, very comfortable on the ball. And we're going to be playing out from the back, so you've got to be comfortable. The other thing, and this is such a refreshing thing, Lawrence, to discuss the goalkeeper without having absolutely any doubt as to who starts in goals. Joe Hart, so much to like about him since he's came in. None more so than making saves, which is pretty important for a goalkeeper, but that's been lacking for a while. And a very important save when we were 1-0 up. We've gone up the park and scored the second goal 2 minutes later. He is going to be pivotal. I think his experience is going to be pivotal going away to Seville on Thursday night, Lawrence.
Aye, listen, he's head and shoulders above all the other keepers at the club. But when you watch him in the game, he's talking the defence through it. It's definitely the base of strong spine of the team for us, isn't he? As you said, he's made a save. We've maybe went a year without keepers that were doing those kind of saves. He made it look easy. He's anticipated what the boy's doing. He's went early, and yeah, it's his experience that have got him that. He looks comfortable enough with the ball at his feet. I don't think there's any debate that he's our number one. I think, luckily taking that pay cut to come to us, that's a huge pay cut he's come to. Just to play football, it shows his desire. He wants to achieve things in his career. He wants to win things.
See the thing though, right? And I'm looking at the TV screen at the moment. They're talking about Ronaldo and modern football with the incredible wages and the transfer fees. Surely there comes a point, though, Lawrence, where you've made enough money. I mean, I think it's great that any professional in any walk of life makes a decision that isn't based on the salary, and that's what Joe Hart's done. He's made a football decision, but you don't see it very often in modern football, do you?
No, I mean, you're Messi in tears leaving Barcelona because he didn't want to leave. Well, take the wage cut. That was a choice for us to leave. I don't want to leave. I'm in tears. Well, take the wage cut. So you don't see it often enough. I think, after Samaras was a guy that said it, wasn't he? He could go elsewhere and earn more money, but he wanted to stay and win trophies. And You don't want that kind of desire. People that want to be playing, people that want to be on the park and want to be playing for Celtic.
And it's the exact opposite of some of the outgoing players, because you can talk about ambition and say, well, this is the level that I want to play at by going down south. But I think it was Jim Orr that made the point to me, if you go back 12 or 18 months ago and you look at the type or the calibre of clubs that were interested in Christopher Ajer and Ryan Christie and Odsonne Edouard, and you compare them to the clubs that they actually went to, then you look at this ambition, which is almost like the default position. You know, part of it may be ambition, but a lot of it is down to the wages. Of course it is. You know, you look at Chris Ajer, Paolo Maldini confirmed that AC Milan were interested in him. He was a player of interest to AC Milan. He's gone to Brentford. Now, I'm not being disrespectful to Brentford because they've got a very good setup there. And that was one of the clubs that Dominic Mackay, who we'll be talking about a wee bit later, benchmarked, you know, for Celtic. You know, he spoke about Brentford as an example of how to run a modern football club in relation to how they bring through the youth and how they work the transfer market, etc. And, you know, you look at Ryan Christie, who apparently had been interested in some Premiership clubs. There was also talk of him going to Sampdoria. And then all of a sudden, you know, when he goes down, he goes to his childhood idols, Bournemouth. You know, Arsenal, Leicester were said to be interested in Edouard, who eventually goes down to Crystal Palace. Now, we have started off the broadcast with an ACSOM logo at the bottom, but I know that everybody that's tuning in would much rather that ACSOM logo was replaced with Patrick McGilp. So let's invite Patrick into the stream just as soon as we all get the headphones on. We'll get Patrick on and I'll reshuffle the screen in just a wee second. Patrick, how are you doing, sir?
Not bad, not bad. Having a few Wi-Fi issues there, but I managed to get in.
Not like you. It is not like you. I'm going to throw a little question over to you before I sort out the screen here. And the question is, the defence going into Thursday night, we've got a situation where Taylor is out with a reoccurring shoulder injury, but we've got Ralston coming back. So we're left with two right backs and young Montgomery. And of course, we've signed Liam Scales, but he's never played for the club. I feel it's a bit risky to throw anybody in if it can be helped. Lawrence wants to play Montgomery. I'm playing Juranovic out of position. How do you deal with the two full-backs, Paddy?
Well, I'm actually quite a big Montgomery fan. I would have played him, I'd have started him against Ross County on Saturday there. I'm not sure about playing him away to Real Betis, I'll be honest. I'd probably consider playing Juranovic at left back, like we did at Ibrox, to be honest. I thought it was, for a player out of position playing his first game for the club, I thought it was pretty good at left back, Juranovic. And I think Montgomery's more of an attacking fullback, whereas away to Real Betis will probably need to be doing quite a lot of defending. So I think I'm sticking with Juranovic at left back, and
Juranovic at left
playing
back,
Ralston at right back.
Yeah. Again, centre halves, we've already got Lawrence's take on the centre half situation. I agree with it. I still think Stephen Welsh will be feeling hard done by because he's not done anything specifically wrong. It's just that obviously the manager has an idea of strengthening the squad. He brings in a player kind of last minute who has more experience than Stephen Welsh. He's acquitted himself really well in his debut. So you start with Carter Vickers alongside Starfelt. Is that something that you have an issue with, or would you run with that, Patrick?
I didn't have an issue with it on Saturday there. I thought Carter Vickers was really, really impressive. I'm still not really convinced by Starfelt, but he seems to be persevering with him. I think if he was to make any more mistakes, I'm not sure, because he did persevere with Beaton for quite a few games and he kept on making the mistakes and eventually dropped them. So I think he's trying to persevere with Starfelt probably because of the price tag that we spent on him, the fact he was a European player. Mm-hmm. So I think it probably will be Cameron, Carter, Vickers and Starfelt again on Thursday. I'm hoping that they can keep a clean sheet like they did on the Saturday. But I'm actually also quite a big fan of Stephen Welsh. I'd quite like to see him come back in. But if it's Carter, Vickers and Starfelt, I'm more than happy with that, I think.
Then there's a few other questions to be asked, a few other dilemmas for the gaffer to face. One of these dilemmas certainly is not the striker position, because we've got someone who's come in, Lawrence, who is much maligned in Albion Ayeti. His Celtic career has not really got off to a good start. I mean, one season during the worst season in the last decade, certainly, for Celtic. And he was in and out of the side, never really looked sharp, did he? Never really looked fit. We've seen a couple of flashes where, people keep saying the old cliche, there's a player in there. And he's been thrown in simply because he was the only striker we had. The other option was to play Abada or Jota out of position there against Ross County. So he's been thrown in there. But he's got a couple of second-half goals, which will do his confidence world of good. Even if Giacomakis was to be fit for Thursday night, I think that Postecoglou, would run with Ayeti anyway.
Yeah, he scored 2 goals. One a cracking header. It was a difficult header. I think when he first came in, was it 4 goals, 5 games? And then obviously fell away. Didn't look fit last season. Definitely looks a lot fitter this season. I don't think there's much of an option up there front. I think for me it's Albion Ayeti leading the line.
My only concern about Ayeti is quite a few times, Patrick, we've seen Jota, making runs or looking for someone to be into space. And there wasn't that same link up that I think you're going to get with Kyogo now. We know that Kyogo is I would suggest he's a different level. We actually paid less money for Kyogo than we did for Ayeti. But I think that there is going to be an issue with linking up because, Abada and Jota have a very direct kind of style of play. And Jota, I just think he seemed to be a wee bit ahead in terms of his thinking of Ayeti. And I think that in the middle there, you've got a player in Tom Rogic who isn't a certain starter for me. I mean, what would you do with him, guys? Because he's come in after the long-haul flights. He's looked a bit jaded. Now, Celtic are going to have a couple of days extra to prepare for this game. Betis were playing last night. They were playing last night and they're playing again on Thursday. So we've got a couple of days of extra recuperation. They picked up an injury as well last night. So would you stick with Rogic? We know, Lawrence, that there's a relationship between Ange and Tommy Rogic. He's been playing pretty well this season. But it wasn't great against Ross County. I'm putting it down to tiredness and fatigue.
Listen, hopefully McCarthy's fit. If McCarthy was fit, I'd maybe change it up, have McCarthy and Beaton and McGregor further forward. I think
that is a bold move. Beaton.
Yeah, I think defensive mid. He'd do a job in there next to McCarthy. He's got good ball retention. And frees McGregor. And McGregor is a cracking attacking player. And I think he's wasted when we play him further back.
So you're dropping Turnbull as well?
Yeah, I think he's played his way out of the team again. And I think Rogic just looked really tired. So I think it'd be a more solid midfield. McCarthy and Beaton, and then McGregor playing a wee bit further forward. Interesting
take there, Patrick. Now, there's a couple of wee questions I would ask. First and foremost, Beaton's not been in the squad. So I don't know if there's an unconfirmed injury to Beaton because he's normally there or thereabouts. If he's not injured, I certainly would expect him to be in the 20-man squad. He would be possibly on the bench because we really are. I mean, it was a very weak bench that we had against Ross County, Patrick. I'm guessing when you're adding a few more bodies onto that, we really are going into the kind of young and inexperienced lot of players that we've got. Beaton, I think, would come back into that category. But I think Lawrence makes a good point on McCarthy. I know he's only played 3 substitute games for Celtic. If indeed Ange Postecoglou decides to rest Tommy Rogic, maybe put someone on the bench as a last 20, 30 minute impact sub, then McCarthy could be in for a start, his first start for Celtic. Is that a risk, do you think, Patrick?
I think the fact he's only played 3 substitute appearances, I didn't realise it was as small as that. I thought he'd actually came off a wee bit more, but I think that would probably be a bit of a risk. I don't know if I'd trust Beaton at defensive midfield. I think I'd actually rather play Liam Shaw if you're going to go with 2 defensive midfielders, because I think Liam Shaw's been more impressive this season than Beaton has. I know he's nowhere near as experienced as near Beaton, but Beaton keeps making the mistakes. I just don't think you can trust him anymore. I'd drop Rogic for McCarthy, and if you were playing 2 defensive midfielders, I probably would drop Turnbull as well. But with Tom Roderick, I just don't think that you can. I don't think they can rely on him in Europe. He doesn't quite turn it on the same way he does in the domestic games. I think with the step up he struggles because he's quite slow, and I think Turnbull's actually quite slow as well in terms of their pace. I think you mentioned Jota earlier. I was relatively impressed with Jota in the first half on Saturday. He was doing all the sort of step overs and skill moves, and he had quite a good first touch. And he was forcing it into Ayeti, and I don't know if it's just they don't have the partnership yet, but it was as if there was no real final ball quality there. But I think I probably would go with a defensive midfielder on Thursday night, and I think it probably would be McCarthy.
I think it's a good shout. My own feeling on this, and I'm only predicting, which you're allowed to do on the podcast, I'm thinking that he's going to go with McCarthy and McGregor, but with Turnbull as a number 10, Jota left, Abada right, and obviously Ayeti through the middle. That's how I think he'll line up. So not as bold as you guys. I think he's going to play it safe. But the question would be, and I'm going to bring this in from Terence Pat, who's watching on YouTube, I wouldn't have Soro anywhere near the starting 11 or subs coming on. He is a liability, gives away possession and can't tackle. Interestingly, no one mentioned Soro when we were talking about bringing someone else in, maybe to be more of a defensive midfielder. What has gone wrong with Soro, Lawrence, this season? I mean, when he came in against Lille, he made a big impression. He then went on a very good run. I've mentioned this before. He drops out of the Scottish Cup final because of food poisoning. Didn't really get back to that early form. And I don't think we've seen what Soro can do under Ange Postecoglou, because, I mean, the appearances have been few and far between. But when he has come into the play, he's breaking it up for all the wrong reasons. He's given away too many fouls. What has happened to Soro? I mean, last season there was supposed interest from Tottenham Hotspur, but he seems to have regressed slightly.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. He's given away too many cheap free kicks, but it's naive or trying too hard to impress. He's just forever giving away cheap free kicks and putting us under pressure. We haven't been the best at defending balls into the box, and we can't afford a midfielder to be given the opposition the opportunity to get so many set pieces in a game.
No, well, going by past experience of that Celtic defence, Lawrence, you really can't be given any kind of free kicks 30, 40 yards out. I remember when we played Hibs at Easter Road, the 2-2 game, when Luxalt scored late on, and we gave away a free kick, and it was about 10 yards inside their own box. And I was worried there, and they scored from the resulting free kick. They scored. So, yeah, absolutely. Although I do think we are stronger at the back. What about yourself, Patrick? Does that concern you? Because Soro did look like a bit of a find when he came back in. Remember, he comes in, you're looking at his performances, and you think, well, him and Turnbull should have been brought in earlier at that stage last season.
Yeah, when they both started against Lille, I thought, here's two players that should be playing every single week for the rest of the season, because, the creativity in the midfield, I think Brown and Christie were probably the two that were looking to take out and then put Turnbull and Soro in. And it was night and day compared to what we'd seen up until that point in the season. I wasn't that big a fan of Soro's first touch. I thought his passing was a bit erratic, but, miles ahead of what Brown was offering his last season. And I think he probably has regressed a bit since he first came into the side. I think Turnbull's just going through a bad bit of form now in comparison. I think he's still a really, really top player.
Yeah.
But with Soro, you're right what you're saying. It is telling that neither me or Lawrence even considered him for Thursday night. I think when he came on Saturday, I don't know about giving away free kicks, but there's a few backwards passes that put us in a bit of danger, and I think he's liable to that as well. So, yeah, it's a mystery about what we're going to do with him in the future, but I definitely wouldn't start him on Thursday night.
It just shows you, again, as well, how many players, when a new manager comes in, are totally revitalised. Others don't, it just doesn't suit them. It's an interesting one, and hopefully it's something that Ange Postecoglou can solve, because I think we've seen enough in his early performances last season to say that we could mould a player out of him, and I hope that is the case. I mean, you look at the transfer of Ncham, one of the worst bits of business you can imagine. One moment you're getting. Apparently, you're being offered £12 million from Porto. 18 months later, you're actually paying money to get his contract ripped up and he goes down south and signs with Swansea. And you don't want a situation where we lose a player where there definitely is potential there. And I think there is potential in Soro. I agree with you on Turnbull, by the way. I would keep playing him. I think he can play his way out of this, as he has done in the past. He's had a wee dip in form at the beginning of the season. He came back strong. And I think that in order for him to prove as well that he can do it at this level, you've got to give him the confidence of a start on Thursday night. Now, when we're looking ahead to that game, we thought for a while that Celtic fans would be able to travel to Seville once again and do the club proud over there, as we did back in the day in the UEFA Cup final. That was quickly removed from Celtic fans' diary. So we will be tuning in any way we possibly can on Thursday night. How do you reckon? I mean, we're looking at a situation here, Patrick, where we've gone into the early rounds of Europe with one right back, and we joked months ago, we're going to be starting with Ralston at right back. We went into that game with one first-team right back. We went into the game with, two centre-halves. And then when one of them, who is a converted centre-half, gets sent off, we then have to pull in and give a debut to an 18-year-old in Dane Murray, who I thought equipped himself really, really well. And you think to yourself, after the transfer window, we're not going to have such an issue with that. We're going into this game on Thursday night, and we've got one striker. So, it's just the same problem, but in a different area of the pitch. So we're having to play the one striker that we've got fit. If we are able to come through Thursday night with anything, a point, for example, I mean, it's an incredible job Postecoglou has done, given the circumstances with the personnel, Patrick.
I would definitely take a point right now, because I think Betis are a really, really good team. It's funny how this seems to keep on happening. I'm not sure if we're having poor transfer windows or we're just the unluckiest team in the world, because we had 4 strikers against Ferencváros last season, and all 4 were unable to play. I think 3 were unfit and 1 was injured. So it's absolutely phenomenal that this keeps on happening to us. I think earlier on in the season with Midfield, it was just poor management from the board. You're almost at the end of July and you've only got 2 centre-halves and 1 right back, and you know that 2 of those 3 players definitely aren't good enough. But yeah, it's also quite funny how we were saying, we're going to go into a European campaign with Ralston at right back. How terrible is this? And by the end of that European campaign, he's probably one of our better players, So, yeah, I mean, I'm also not a fan of these. I think it's bad communication from the club, because you were saying earlier about Beaton. We don't know if that's a new injury. There's been no communication whatsoever. And then with Giacomakis, I'm just assuming that he's unfit. I don't know if you two know anything, but I don't think he's injured. I think he's just not ready to start. I don't know if that's the case. So, yeah, I'm hoping Maggetti gets some newfound confidence after those 2 goals on Saturday.
Yeah, I hope so as well. I mean, give us a wee prediction, because I won't be speaking to you guys before Thursday night. Patrick, starting with yourself.
I'll go for a 2-2.
2 each, I'd be happy with that. And it wouldn't surprise me either if we concede a few. But going forward, with the creativity, Jota and Abada, again, it wouldn't surprise me if we did get a 2-2. What about yourself, Lawrence?
I'm going to go 2-1 Betis. I just think the level that they're at, for where we are as a team, it's just a bit early to be playing someone like that. We're missing Kyogo, who adds so much more than just, the centre forward. They give so much energy and inspiration to the team. So, yeah, I'm going to go 2-1 Betis.
I tell you what, Lawrence has been bold today. We're playing Beaton and he's going for 2-1 Betis. I think that's the first time anyone has ever predicted a Celtic defeat on the ACSOM Bulletin, Lawrence. So,
no,
fair play.
I predicted last European game away we would beat 2-1.
Did you?
Aye, we did.
Kissy death, right. We'll stop you there. Moving on. John Sweeney actually comes in with a good point. Going back to what we were talking about, guys, if Ayeti gets injured during the match, who plays up front? You're playing someone out of position at this stage. You're basically going to be playing, I would suggest, Abada or, Jota, because both of them can play through the centre. It's not their preferred positions. Jota answered that question at the press conference, didn't he? They've played there for the previous clubs. So you're playing somebody out of position, John. And for example, if it's Abada, who do you play on the right? There's the next question. If it's Jota, who do you play on the left? Because we're thin on the... So basically, it's an issue that just moves around the park. You've got an issue up front. If Ayeti pulls up for any reason, You've then got an issue at the right-hand side because we don't know, again, communication, Patrick, we don't know when Forrest is coming back, and behind him you've got Dembele, who was looking promising in pre-season, but he had an absolutely shocking challenge against Bristol, wasn't it? Bristol City.
So, yeah.
And I think they've done his ankle. So on the left-hand side, if Jota isn't playing there now that Christie's away, who plays out left? Because Johnson's not back. So, yeah, it is going to be a big concern, John. And I think it also shows, it was a decent enough transfer window, but the manager must have been looking at that thinking, I'm at least another 2 or 3 players short. It would have been difficult. It's going to be hard to bring 12 players into a squad. But, it would have been a lot more difficult if it was 15, but I still think we're short without any shadow of a doubt. A few other things to discuss before we move on to the board, because there are some boardroom discussions we're going to have today. Daniel Mack agrees 2-2, and I actually think it would be a good draw for Celtic to go over there, because once Kyogo comes back, we're a completely different beast altogether. Kevin visited us yesterday in the studio. He ended up driving about in a chopper. These are the things that happen at a State of Mind. I'm not going to tell you why, but you will see it. Paddy, you're a witness to that. Kevin Graham comes in to say the Jaffa Cake thing. Does that mean Rangers are the Rangers for tax purposes? I've no idea what you're talking about, Kev, but I thought I would bring you in anyway.
Cakes and biscuits and stuff, mate. Different tax.
They're cake only in name, Lawrence, if you want to bring that debate into... Oh, yeah.
But they go hard when they go off.
Do you dip them in your tea? Do you dip them in your tea?
I don't drink tea, mate. So,
can you trust somebody that doesn't drink tea, Patrick? I'm worried about you. We're getting beat 2-1. Beaton's playing and you didn't drink tea. We need to move on. We mentioned Craig Bellamy. Obviously, Craig Bellamy had a short spell at Celtic under Martin O'Neill. He came in and he made a big impression, didn't he? I mean, we won the Scottish Cup in O'Neill's final game in charge, 1-0 against Dundee United. There's the famous hat-trick against Dundee United at Tannadice. He relished playing against Rangers. He's one of these players, Lawrence, that Celtic fans took to our heart. Is that because there was a rebellious nature to Bellamy throughout his career? We kind of take to players like that often. I mean, we were talking about Johnny Doyle last week with Paul McQuaid. We like people who are rapscallions, and he had a wee bit of that about him, didn't he?
Definitely, but it's probably more his goals. Let's be honest.
Especially that hat trick.
Top draw, wasn't he? It was absolutely top draw. Shame we couldn't keep him, but that was another season we needed a rebuild, wasn't it? That's why we couldn't keep him. Yeah. It was either spend all the money in Bellamy or rebuild.
You're spot on.
Aye. So much the same. Owners is that a recurrent theme?
It's a good point, actually. Yep. Aye.
So we had someone that would have stayed, was absolutely top quality. And we had to let him go because our squad was so threadbare again.
It's an excellent point because it is going to lead into the wider discussion maybe in the last 15 minutes of the show where we talk about the board and where we are with the board and, after the departure of Dominic Mackay. But reading Gordon Strachan's book, he talks about the situation where he comes in and he has the option to buy Craig Bellamy, just like you say, Lawrence, who had obviously played previously with Gordon Strachan at Coventry City. And Gordon Strachan wanted to pair up Craig Bellamy with John Hartson because they had played together at Coventry. There was an understanding, and he liked that idea of having those two guys up front. And quite frankly, looking back, no wonder. I mean, what a great partnership that would have been. Bellamy would have done all the running, but, there would have been a good partnership. But he was faced with a dilemma. And a lot of people look at that point of O'Neill's departure and Strachan coming in as a massive downsizing. And you look at the players that Martin O'Neill had brought in, massive transfer fees, but also massive wages. I mean, even players like, Steve Guppy coming in from Leicester was on a big wage. Magnus Hedman, huge wages when he came to the club, when we brought him in as well. So we had put the wage bill through the roof, and one of the jobs Strachan had was to bring that back down. So he had this dilemma where he could buy Bellamy, or he could go out and buy 3 players. And the 3 players he eventually decided to buy, as much as he loved Bellamy, was Magic Zuraski, a guy called Nakamura, I think it was, and Artur Boric, who initially came in on loan, and then, the loan deal was made permanent. So he had to wheel and deal, if you like. And then slowly but surely, a lot of the big earners were phased out under Gordon Strachan, Chris Sutton, Neil Lennon eventually, John Hartson, Alan Thompson. So a lot of the big earners were pushed out. But it was unfortunate because I would have liked to have seen, Patrick, a full season with Craig Bellamy, firing on all cylinders at Celtic Park.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not old enough to remember Craig Bellamy, unfortunately, but I've heard that he totally dragged us in that 2004-05 season because obviously Larsson left for Barcelona and that he was basically the striker that was left to score all the goals that Larsson couldn't anymore. And very unfortunate last day of the season, last 3 or 4 minutes of the season, we lose the league that season. I think, as you were saying there, obviously Strachan fancied doing his own thing, bringing in 3 other players instead of Bellamy, and at least 2 of them were massive successes. I know Zawadzki scored a couple of goals, but Nakamura and Boric, club heroes, go down in history, remembered forever as fan favourites. But yeah, sometimes it's just not meant to be. It's like Patrick Roberts, he comes in, does well on a loan, obviously doesn't fancy coming here permanently, or the club don't really fancy bringing him in, and it's just, you wonder what could have been, but sometimes you've just got to be fond of the memories that you've got instead of sort of wishing what could have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a point during that transfer window where I would have taken Boric and Nakamura back, Patrick, at the age of 42, combined age of 84, for the European campaign. Now, the reason we're talking about Craig Bellamy, and by the way, I've got to mention as well that he gave us a lovely message at Christmas time when we were doing the charity weekender. He'd been over working at Anderlecht because obviously he followed his ex-teammate over there and he was coaching over at Anderlecht, and he's taken a step away from football to deal with his depression. So it's always important to raise awareness at all times. So we're talking about Craig Bellamy in that respect, as well as being a fantastic footballer back in the day with Celtic and many other top clubs, including Newcastle and Liverpool. And Coventry before that, who you'll not remember it, Patrick, but they were a top club as well. Coventry City were in the top league for a record amount of unbroken years before they were relegated. And once they were relegated, they were one of these clubs, Lawrence, that just, they fell into that system in English football where you can fall away. I mean, growing up, Luton Town were always in the top league when I was growing up. Sheffield Wednesday were always in the top league. Leeds United.
The Coventry first team, Shadow Stripe, wasn't it? The Shadow Stripe Strips won the cup.
That's right, yeah. Hummel.
Yeah. Cracking team.
Keith Houchin scored that day and they're up playing for Hibs. Anyway, we're boring Patrick because he's from a different generation, right? But we bring up the story of Craig Bellamy because it's something that you've always got to try and raise awareness of. Mental health issues of any way, shape or form have to be spoken about. And I think that it's high time we did bring it up again on the broadcast, because you think about the last couple of weeks that certain people have endured in terms of online bullying and harassment and the effect that it's had on them. Very, very close to ACSOM as well. So you've got to put a stop to this when you see it happening. I've seen it myself. Interestingly enough, a few weeks ago, I was getting a rare old time of it from an individual. And when I looked at his fellow Celtic fan, his Twitter profile, he was constantly going on about mental health. And I'm thinking to myself, but you're targeting me. I mean, it didn't bother me personally, but he's targeting me. And all the usual stuff came out. And I'm thinking to myself, a lot of people, it's not just about putting it on a tweet because it looks good. You've really got to be an advocate of mental health awareness and call it out when somebody is getting online bullying and harassment, because it's totally unacceptable. You've just got to look at the way that people react because someone's on a screen. They think, well, this isn't going to affect them. I can say or do whatever I like. It doesn't affect. I'm not talking about us per se, but just in general. So Craig Bellamy is suffering depression and he's fighting that. So we wish him all the very best because he was a big player for Celtic back in the day. I loved watching him. And he's given us best wishes when we needed them, and we're going to give him the best wishes when he's requiring them as well. Now, Lawrence, we're going to go even further back in time. So, Patrick, stay with us, mate. Stay with us. Barrowfield. Barrowfield was one of these almost mythical places where the Lisbon Lions trained and everything else. I mean, the history of that place goes back to 1965, actually. It was used as a junior It was used as a junior
Waverley,
park.
was it?
Sorry?
Was it Bridgeton Waverley or something? They got it off at?
I'm not sure who it was that played there, Lawrence, but Jock Stein it was actually who came up with the idea of adopting it as a training facility back in the day. And you see the old pictures of the training facility in inverted commas back in the day. It was a mud pit. It was a quagmire and of muck and various other things. And people have told us, Frank McGarvey's told us that there used to be like a scrappies next to it. And he was a Rangers fan. So when Celtic were training, he would burn things like big tyres and make, so that the smoke and all that would bellow over to Barrowfield and put the players off. Bizarre. Ajax were offered the training facilities in the early 80s, and Johan Cruyff thought that Celtic were at the wind-up when they turned up to train at Barrowfield training complex because it was so bad. But the Lisbon Lions won the European Cup training on Barrowfield, and David Proven once said they won it in spite of the training facilities. So there's a wee checkered history of Barrowfield. It's now going to be redeveloped. So planning permission has been granted by Glasgow City Council in relation to the changing facilities, an indoor gym at this moment in time. There's also a pending application for an indoor training facility. Now, this is something that, we thought we were leaving Barrowfield behind back in the day, Lawrence, when, Lennox Town was unveiled back in 2007, it was now, unveiled up there. Do you think that Lennox Town has been the success we thought it was going to be? I mean, obviously Barrowfield can be used as a training facility by, for example, the ladies team or the Colts team, as well as when required by the first team. But has Lennox Town been a success?
Well, I thought we were leaving Barrowfield before that when McCann left and he promised the money, said, look, Celtic will give you the money.
Yep.
What was it, 50% he was going to match, just build a facility. And obviously the board let that come and go without, they were too late to take advantage of McCann's offer. Has Lennox Town been a success? Well, it's already dated. We don't have an indoor pitch, do we?
And I'm not saying for a minute that Barrowfield's replacing Lennox Town. I'm just saying that obviously Lennox Town was us moving away apparently from the Barrowfield complex. But there has been quite a few complaints up there about particularly the indoor pitch.
It's already dated. I think that's one of the things Ange has come in and said, we need an indoor pitch. We need proper facilities where we can train all year round. I think anytime I've been up there, especially in the winter, it's fairly cold. I don't know if it's much colder than Barrowfield, but Barrowfield being lowered down, or right next to the river, you think the ground would be a bit softer than up there. The players we've had through, have we had enough through? Since we've had Lennox Town
since 2007. I mean, it's a debate. It's a debate you could have, to be fair.
Yeah, that's why we're spending the money. Obviously first team training, but you want to be bringing your youngsters through as well, aren't you?
Yep.
I think we're hoping for a lot more. We're hoping for a conveyor belt, shall we say, and it's maybe Ange's the man to kind of get that conveyor belt, because we've talked about with the death of the reserve league, or the under 23s, under 21s, whatever you call it. We're now trying the Colts, which to me is too low a level. There's definitely been a gap between under 18s and first team and how we bleed them in. Maybe Ange is the man to do that. Yeah, you need a manager that's going to give youth its chance, don't you? And especially games like Ross County, Patrick touched on it. Montgomery could have been playing at left back, but that's a game that maybe under Ange we'll see more and more youngsters coming into the team. Whether that's because we've been lacking squad numbers, but he comes with the reputation of developing youngsters, so hopefully we see that this season.
He does, and I think that also comes in if you're thinking about the bigger picture that Ange will be looking at. Patrick, he's mentioned anytime he's asked about his coaching staff, he always comes away and says he's happy with them. He's not going to tell us publicly if he wasn't anyway. But what he has underlined is the fact that he does need other staff, and he's talking about what I guess are now deemed as normal positions at a football club when you're looking at data analysis and sports science, and he's talking about that side of the game, and as well as the staff, you need the facilities. You need the facilities in order for them to undertake those roles as well. So it would be great to have an additional facility there. But when you're seeing, for example, Leicester City unveiling their new training complex, and it looks like a different world to what we've got, I still think that it's something that we are miles away in terms of a modern football club having the best facilities possible to rear your talent, but also to develop the players that you've already got. I mean, back in the day, you know, did we even show players like Paolo Di Canio and George Cadet, Barrowfield? Did we show them?
I think we showed them the
Coming
oxygen.
from AC Milan, I will show you Barrowfield.
I think we showed them the oxygen chamber that Brian Scott got. If you remember, that was the splash of the view, wasn't it? We've got an oxygen chamber to
That's
help
right.
recovery.
Yep. Wonder where that is.
Probably still using it.
Interesting. So Patrick, I mean, where are we as a club when it comes to the facilities, the training complex? Because I know that it's a different world in terms of finance down south. And you look at the Man City training complex, it's just unbelievable. But, you know, Leicester City have unveiled something of absolute beauty. And you think to yourself, wow, how can we keep a manager like Brendan Rodgers when they're offering you that? How can we keep a player like Ozan Edouard? Or, you know, people criticise Brentford, but just have a look at the football club. Look at where they're going. And Ayer, you know, is looking at that and thinking, well, that's a lot better than what I've got up the road in Glasgow there. So that frustrates me because there's a much bigger picture here, isn't there?
100%. And what Lawrence said about 5 minutes ago, that's the first time I've heard that Fergus McCann was willing to front up 50% for a new training facility, and the Celtic board never took it up. I've never heard that before. So it just shows you how slow we were to act even back then, 20 odd years ago. Yeah, I think if we're going to use Barrowfield, it's definitely in need of an upgrade. It'll be interesting to see if the upgrade happens, because obviously we get planning permission from Glasgow City Council for the hotel and the museum, and we only had planning permission for 3 years, and it's since expired. So we got that permission and then just didn't bother to use it. So hopefully we'll actually follow through with this and redevelop it. I think it's mainly for the women's team and the junior teams, but yeah, certainly in need of an upgrade. And what you were saying there about an indoor pitch, I think if, you know, Ange is probably the best person to consult on that. If, you know, I've seen other teams, certainly Premier League teams, and as you say with Leicester, they've got an indoor pitch. It helps in the cold weather. And I don't think it'd be a surprise to anyone to find out that we are lacking in the football analysis department. That, you know, I think we had that, we had a young guy who Brendan brought in. He was running his own blog while sitting in the stands as a university student. Brendan brought him in, and then Brendan took him away again to Leicester because he was so impressive. And I think we were more than happy to let him go. So it just shows you, I think we probably actually undervalue that part of the football world. So I think the board and the people running the club need to grasp the importance of it first, and then we can actually look to start upgrading it.
Well, I think back to that's always been the big criticism, isn't it? The indoor facility up the road. And I'm going to bring this point in from Johnny Ryan, who's commenting on YouTube, still waiting for Lennox Town to be renamed after Tommy Burns. 100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't know why that's even a question. That needs to happen. But I remember, if you're talking about Lennox Town, and that was unveiled in October 2007. Let's have a wee look at the comparison down south. So a year later, September 2008, Manchester City paid £32.5 million for Robinho. Remember him? Bought from Real Madrid. He didn't like training in the cold. He didn't fancy it because, you know, he's from sunnier climes. So Man City built an indoor facility because Robinho didn't like training outside. That's a true story. You know, and when you're looking at that situation, at that stage, you know, we're building Lennox Town with something that looks like a gym hall as an indoor training facility. And a club like Man City, who, to be fair, had just been taken over, and that millions and hundreds of millions had been pumped into them around about that time. In fact, the new owners came in on the day Robinho signed, but it really is a comparison, and we need to improve what we've got. I think that's the big point. We need to improve what we've got, because otherwise we're going to be left standing. You're looking at that facility down at Leicester, and it's embarrassing when you compare it to what we've got. It really is embarrassing. And again, it feeds in, Lawrence, to the youth development as well.
But see, obviously it's the gym, the modular gym I've got, and change of facilities we've got. So that will just be moving the gym out of the main stand at Celtic Park. You know, that's what we'll be replacing there. So you'd like to think it's going to be a huge improvement, which, you know, an indoor pitch would be. But I think, we're just going to be moving the gym out of Celtic Park, really, aren't we? That it no longer have. Remember, you used to go down and you'd see the players kind of running up, maybe stopping in the Belvedere Cafe.
For a square sausage roll before training at Barrowfield.
Or in between, going back to get changed, they'd stop in there, grab that, then run up and get changed. Some of them would drive up and down, but most of them would just run the distance to Celtic Park to get changed.
It reminds me of the story that Evan Williams told in relation to his first day at training at Celtic, where he walks up, they get changed at Celtic Park, they're walking up London Road, and John Hughes and Tommy Gemmell convinces them that on their walk up, they always go in and buy a couple of rolls and sausage. So Evan Williams does that. And he scoffs them on the way up to training. And obviously they're just winding him up. And then he gets absolutely beasted at training and he's spewing up all over the place. But welcome to Celtic, Evan. So we've spoken about some aspects of the club. We're looking forward to Thursday night, Patrick. But there are still a lot of questions to be answered, certainly asked. I don't know if they're going to be answered in and around the inner workings of the club at the moment. And my big concern, people are focusing on the football, and I get that. But my big concern is we've got a board in place at the moment. Those decision makers that, and we could go as far back, Lawrence, as Martin O'Neill and Brendan Rodgers, but in the near past, they basically presided over a situation with Neil Lennon that dragged on for months and months, possibly half a year, far too long, without making a decision. They then presided over the debacle that was Eddie Howe, dragging on and then not getting the deal done, and then bringing in a CEO who's lasted just over 70 days, Patrick. I mean, how much confidence do you have at this moment in time that we are being run properly by the correct people?
None at all is a short answer. It's just occurred to me there when you mentioned Neil Lennon. The board have actually been quicker to, and none of this is confirmed, but they've actually been quicker to drive Dominic Mackay out than what they were to sack Neil Lennon and hire a new manager. Because, of course, it took us about 106 days to hire a new manager. You're saying there that they managed to get rid of Dom Mackay in 70 days. If new CEOs are coming in and they can't even last 3 months working with people like Ian Bankier and Brian Wilson and Dermot Desmond, then we're in a hell of a situation, because at the absolute least, they all have to work together as a team and have a coherent strategy for how they want the club to be run. And I just don't think, there are people there that have been there for 10, 15 years. There's no way that they're the best suited people for that job. And I think there needs to be a massive overhaul in the boardroom.
See, that's an interesting point you make there about the management situation. But they were very, very quick in the decision around Dominic Mackay. The big question, I guess, Lawrence, is, with regards to that position, you're going to be looking at that. If you are a forward-thinking visionary, someone who wants to modernise the football club that you're joining, and you look at what's happened to Dominic Mackay, who was all about modernisation, he was all about engagement, communication, and you see what's happened there, and you realise that perhaps, let's say it was an oval peg in a round hole in his case, but perhaps they are going to be resistant to that change. It's going to put a lot of these prime candidates off, surely, and then you're left with an internal, promotion or shifting of the deck chairs, and nothing changes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose sporting CEOs in Scotland there's not many. You get good track record at SRU. It's obviously a big announcement by Celtic. So anyone that Celtic could be targeting for the job now will be aware of just how short the last guy lasted and what a good track record they had before. You'd expect them to reach out to Dom and say, "Look, Dom, what can you tell me here? Whether it's off the record or not, what actually went wrong here?" Celtic's on record saying we need to get a new structure in. I don't know how long we've been getting a new structure in for now. No head of recruitment through a transfer window. Why would you need one in a transfer window? No director of football. I don't know if we're still going to do a director of football. Maybe it changes with the wind, but it could come down to what purpose do these positions serve us? What purpose is the board serving? It seemed to be the Dermot and Peter show, just straight to Dermot to tell Peter what to do, and that's how things were getting run. So what purpose is the board serving us? If obviously we lost Ivan Tory, he was in the building. But we got Albion Ayeti, and well, hopefully he has scored 2 goals and hopefully it continues. But
Lawrence is on the wind-up today, Patrick. He's now bringing up Ivan Toney again. I'm just waiting for John McGinn for a full house.
another one, phone in Celtic Park before he, when he's down in Birmingham, trying to get the deal resurrected, try join his boyhood heroes, but I don't believe the phones were working at Celtic Park or anyone was answering them. Yeah. But it's more or less the same people we talked about this last season. There's no point changing a manager if the structure remains the same. It's like putting a new front door in a house that's fallen down. You wouldn't do it because you're not addressing the issues you've got. So largely we've kind of come through a really poor season and disappointing season. We've got a new manager in. Looked as if we'd started the structural changes, but then we thought, actually, we don't fancy these structural changes, would be the rumours. That's a bit radical, modernise. Yeah, that seems a bit of trouble. We've got a manager in, it looks like he knows what he's doing. Maybe that'll just keep the fans happy.
Well, I'm going back on the subject we were talking about in relation to the underinvestment of the training facilities. Yeah, we know that Celtic are working in a different sphere, world than clubs down south, but we still don't have good enough facilities based on our income and the success over the years. So if you think about Barrowfield 1965, right, and then Lennox Town 2007, a takeover in 1994, and we were still using Barrowfield until 2007, even though in 12 years from 1964 to 1976, Celtic reached at least the quarter-final stage of European competition on 9 out of 12 occasions. And you think that Barrowfield was good enough up until 2007? Absolute joke of an opinion to think that we invested properly in the facilities at Celtic Park, even post McCann. And in 2007, up until this point, it's become pretty clear that even Lennox Town needs to be improved. So, it wasn't a comparison between Celtic and English clubs. It was a comparison between the facilities we've got and the facilities we should have. And only now we're looking at Lennox Town all these years later, 14 years later, almost 15 years later, to say maybe it's not a good enough facility. Well,
our strategy is obviously to develop players because we can't afford to compete with anyone in the EPL for players. To do that, you're going to need better facilities. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, listen, here's the strategy. We're going to try and develop our own players, but we're going to make it even harder. What we're going to do is not invest in the facilities for them. It's a minimal investment, it would appear.
Someone else was asking about modernisation. Isn't that modernisation? Isn't training facilities, isn't that part of a modernisation of a football club? We will never know the full story in relation to Dominic Mackay and what the proposals were to the club in terms of his vision. I mean, was he wanting to implement a strategy whereby we did have a modern facility where we could rear our own Lawrence as well as develop those at the club? But I'm now looking at a point that was made just the other day on the bulletin, and a very good point indeed, in relation to the most important person at the moment at the club being Ange Postecoglou, and I absolutely agree with that. There's been comparisons made, again, Patrick, you're going to have to check out the Celtic Wiki as we're talking here before your time. Comparisons made about the Wim Jansen season in relation to the fact that we had a lot of players on the way out. We've lost big players this season. We've got a manager with no prior connection to the club coming in. Didn't he come from Japanese football as well, Wim Jansen? Yep. Well, there you go. So there were comparisons made there. We lost 2 of our first 4 league games, etc., etc. The big comparison I don't want to be making is that Ange Postecoglou only lasts a season. That's the big one that I don't want to be making. But I have said, Patrick, that I think he's now in a stronger position because the boards are in no state to be annoying the Celtic fans anymore with the departure of someone like Ange Postecoglou. And he should be actually going to them and saying, here are my demands in relation to staff that we've spoken about. And in January, this is what I'm expecting.
Yeah. It's. I think he probably does think he's in quite a strong position. I wonder how strong that actually is, if I'm being honest, because, it would be an absolute unmitigated disaster if he was to walk away. He is like the one saving grace at the moment, apart from a few of the key players that we've brought in. But if he was to walk, or if he was to leave the club in some way, there would be massive negative fan reaction. But I'm not even sure what that achieves anymore, because we had protests outside the stadium last year, and then at the AGM a week or two later, the board all get 99% endorsement from the shareholders. So I'm not actually sure what the solution is here anymore, because they seem to just sort of get away with anything that they do, you know. But yeah, I mean, there weren't fans in the stadium last season. If Ange was to leave because of the board in any way, I think they would really, really struggle to sell season tickets, and I think revenues would go down, and we could be looking at a very, very bad situation. So they absolutely have to back the manager, because he's the one saving grace at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Lawrence, we go back to the takeover of the 1990s, and the roots of that change were years before. They were basically based around a board of directors who, in many ways, were Celtic fans. I mean, they'd been born into the running of the club. There was a dynasty of families who ran Celtic Football Club, but they were incompetent when it came to the modernisation of football back then. We're now at a stage where Celtic, again, need to modernise in a different way. It's not so much that we need a full all-seater stadium, etc. That's the position they were in back then. They couldn't raise the capital. They came away with various schemes, canvas lying and all this kind of stuff.
Was it Gefnor or something?
Yeah, and did they exist? Because they hadn't heard the Celtic. Bizarre days, but there are some similarities in that we do need modernisation as a football club. Fans are unhappy with the current incumbents in terms of the boardroom for different reasons than we were back in the day. Do you see the roots here a change? Do you see the roots to change at Celtic Park? Do you think that there will be change? And it certainly isn't going to be something that happens in the next season or so. But, the issues that happened at Celtic before, the roots of that were a good 6-7 years beforehand, weren't they?
There appeared to be, even from the board, there appeared to be, bringing in Dom, there appeared to be a realisation that change was needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I suppose that
the old board did that with Terry Cassidy,
general manager,
for fresh ideas to modernise the club.
So I suppose that they realise they've got a problem. Whether they realise they are the problem or part of the problem is maybe that's what they didn't like. When I've said, well, actually, part of the problem's the way you specifically are behaving and doing things, and maybe that's what they don't like. It's been a bit hard for them to hear. But Patrick's right. Where are we going to go for change? How can we affect it? We've got a billionaire who owns the largest amount of shares, not majority shareholder. Are we looking like, maybe someone coming in to replace him? So, right, Celtic fan that's saying, well, look, I want to take on things and change things, because right now there seems to be been a period since, I'd say, since Mark O'Neill of downgrading. And that goes back quite some time.
With one anomaly being Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, but Strachan done a brilliant job as manager, but he did have to come in and more than half the wage bill, and your 2 last 16s. Maybe that's where the board's looking at and going, we just need another Gordon Strachan that can half the wage bill and get us further in Europe.
And progress further in Europe.
Maybe that's why he's back at the club. I don't know. Maybe they thought, listen, we'll ask Gordon.
Oh, don't go any further with that conversation, Lawrence, right? Because I know what's coming. I know what's coming. One final point, and it's a good one, and it's on Twitch. So thanks for joining us on Twitch. The board know they can do what they want. Full house at European game when it should have been free as a goodwill gesture. Told them that. Goes back to what you say, Patrick. At the AGM, everything's fine. Yeah, continue as you're doing a great job. No, you're absolutely right. Testing times off the park. Hopefully, on the park, we can forget all about this on Thursday night, and we will get a result. As Patrick suggests, where we bring something back to Glasgow. It's been an absolute pleasure once again for a New Look Tuesday Bulletin today with Patrick McGill and Lawrence Conley. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to subscribe and click the notifications bell. There's loads of prizes being given away on a monthly basis. You can even come in and pick your prize up at the studio here in Dalkeith. Lawrence, some of us will be going down to London for the awards ceremony. We are 5 times nominated all over. one-time winner. Hopefully that will be multi-award winning come the 13th or 14th of October, whenever the award ceremony takes place. But yeah, we'll be flying the flag for Celtic fans, and hopefully we'll come back up the road with another trophy, Lawrence.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping for 3, mate. Not last season, but the 4 previous seasons we kind of used to having 3 trophies as Celtic fans.
We did,
So
yeah.
it'd be nice for us to get the show back and get 3, and hopefully Ange is listening in and thinking, if the ACSOM boys can get 3, let's see if I can get my team to do.
A double treble. I can do that. Right. Thanks everybody for joining us. Come back, tune in tomorrow at 12:30 for Celtic State of Mind.